I just want to make sure the video turns on. Yes, we are ready to go. All right, so if you are thinking about food all the time and you want to learn how to make it stop, this is the video to watch. And I'm just going to repeat that because it's really, really important. If you are thinking about food all the time and you want to make it stop, this is the video that is going to help you to understand why it is that you cannot stop thinking about food and what we can do about it. So my name is Lisa Callahan. I am the founder of the Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group, and I also have a wonderful program where I coach my clients to take a journey of self-discovery so that they can get to the root cause of their emotional eating issues. So we're talking about thinking about food all the time today, and I am going to give you some suggestions towards the end of this on how to make it stop. And I promise you that if you stay to the end, you're going to get some amazing suggestions on how to make this stop, because you should not be spending your entire life thinking about food. I did this for about 30 years, and this was my background. This is where my mindset went to. In fact, I can really remember one of my first times that I started to recognize that I was getting caught up in this food thing, as I call it. I was just starting to have my career. I was just starting to be an adult, and I was about maybe 18, 19 years old. I started in a career, and I was a personal fitness trainer, and so I felt like I had a lot of pressure on me just to like look a certain way, to act a certain way. In fact, I remember being shamed in a supermarket when one of my clients looked into my cart, and I had bought Captain Crunch for my then boyfriend at the time, and she kind of looked at me and was like, what do you got in there? And so all of my eating and my thinking about food, it happened in two different ways. One way was about thinking about what I couldn't eat, what I wasn't allowed to eat, what the food police of the world were telling me that I wasn't allowed to do, and how I wasn't allowed. Everybody else could have pizza, not me. And so I put myself in this like perfect frame of mind where this is what I had to do because I was a trainer and I had, an obligation to uphold to my clients. And what I forgot about was that I was a human being, and that I didn't even know realistically that that's not what you're supposed to do. So my constant every second thought was either about what I was going to eat when I was in private, or what I had to show the world that I was eating in public. And so there was like these two separate sides to me. Now, I don't know if you're eating in private or in public, but typically when we're struggling with this food issue, food is always on our mind. So whether we're dieting and we're worried about like measuring and counting points and monitoring and carbs, and am I eating this? Am I eating enough protein? Am I getting enough vitamins? Whatever. That's one whole side of it. And then there's another whole side of it that is just like free for all, kid in a candy store, and you're just going to town because you've been locked in this specific food prison for so long. Now, whether that's your story or not, it really doesn't matter, because whether you're thinking about food 24/7 because you're sad or you're lonely or you're bored or you're not, able to get outside as much as you'd like to, or you don't have as many things going on in your life as you'd like to, and that food becomes a quote-unquote comfort, or you're on the other end of it where it's just like, oh my gosh, this food is calling my name, I can't get enough of it, I don't know what to do, and then you're constantly trying to like push the food away, but it almost feels like you're being like buried alive with the feelings and with the thoughts in your head. And anytime there is something within, a radius of you, it's calling your name. So now there's cookies and cake and stuff. I have key lime pie in my refrigerator right now that I have had in there since Friday? Yeah, Friday. And it's a half a piece of key lime pie, and I have zero desire to have the rest of it. It will actually go in the garbage today because I've asked all the people in my house and nobody else wants any, so we're going to throw it away today. And that's the interesting thing, because back in the day when I was struggling with food all the time and constant, with mindset in my head, I couldn't let that piece of pie sit there. I would have had to eat it. There's no way in that world that I would have been able to throw it away. And if I did throw it away, it would have only been because I was like literally gobbling pieces of it up, and something in my brain was like, oh my gosh, get this away from me now. I've got to throw it away before I eat the whole thing. Now that would have been more on like an entire pie or something. This is just a small piece, but regardless, I wouldn't have been able to throw it away. I would have had to eat it as I was running to the garbage can. what was interesting is that like I did recognize that other people didn't seem to struggle with this. I mean, I've got other people in my house. That pie is not calling their name, and it's not calling mine now either. But I know how it feels to have it calling your name, and that's why I want you to fix this issue, because I did. I'm living proof that this issue can be fixed, that emotional eating is absolutely 1,000 times percent solvable. I don't know if it's ever been solved in the history of the world. I have solved it. So if this is a new concept to you, that's okay by me, because I'm positive that I have solved this issue, and I've solved it through self-discovery. But let's go ahead and talk about what it is that's causing this to happen. And we have to be able to see, what it is that you're doing in your mindset to keep yourself stuck. Like, think about it like this. Like, I know that back in the day, and especially when I was just developing this new habit, what I would do, and I was a new, I was about 19, so I was like new to the world of being an adult. And I can remember thinking to myself, it's interesting, like, why did I take that route? Oh, it passes the mall. Oh, I can stop in my Littlest Muffin, and I would get these little bags, and in my mind it was like, I'll just get this little bit. So I would get these 6 little muffins, and then maybe I would go another direction, and then, there was the TCBY yogurt shop, and I would just get the littlest thing. And so all day long was spent like figuring out like my route on how to get to that food. What was the next stop going to be for me? And over the years, this just continued, but what continued even more so was that the eating became more private than it ever did in my latter years. So when I started when I was in my 20s, it was more of, okay, I can get a muffin, I can have a bagel, I can have a pizza, no problem, it's good. And then it turned into less and less and less and less outside, more and more and more private. So either way, there was a good 30-year span where every single step of my life was around food, whether I was not eating it or whether I was searching it out, whether I was hiding it in my house or whether I was just flat on out binging and just saying, well, I'll start again on Monday. So if this is you, I want you guys to let me know in the comments, and just let me know what it is that you are experiencing, because this is how we're going to get to the root cause of the problem. And so I'm going to look at some notes for just a second, because I just want to make sure that I cover everything that I had planned on it. So I want you to stop and look at your Facebook, look at your Instagram, look at your emails. Are you flooded, and I mean flooded, with information about food? Think about it. Are you getting emails about like how to cook, the best juicing thing possible? Are you in, 7 groups for binge eating? I had a gal the other day that contacted me. We were chatting back and forth, and and she goes, wow, she was really like surprised that like binge eating has so much to do with like abuse and trauma and whatever. And I was like, that's not my group. And so she says, oh yeah, that's right, I'm following another group, And so this is what happens, is that we not only are obsessed with like the eating and like why we're eating, what we're eating, how we're eating, how much we're eating, how little we're eating, too much, too little, whatever, or are we eating in public, or are we eating in private, what it looks like. We're not only obsessed with that, but then we're obsessed with this like the cooking shows and like the websites and the Facebook groups and the Instagram stuff, and like look through your Instagram. Do you have food? Is there like food like lined in every single like corner of your life? And if so, I really want you to understand that the mind works in very sneaky ways. So while you're sitting on top of this problem here, while it's like that is the primary thing in your life, that you're constantly figuring out what to eat, how much to eat, how little to eat, who, what, why, when, and where, and that food is like literally overtaking your thoughts, I also want you to look at how much information you're giving yourself about food. So like, are you constantly reading, healthy eating recipes? Are you like reading, books on clean eating and like the next best diet and the doctor's quick weight loss or the heart diet by, whoever, from just the standpoint of wanting to gather more information, like to learn all about food. So I want you to really see that if you're getting a lot of information about food, if food is constantly in your mindset, if you're constantly thinking about it, what you're doing is you're actually sneakily distracting yourself from ever understanding why it is that that interests you to begin with. Because what will end up happening is that you'll end up keeping what I call a food thing sort of tucked in your back pocket forever. And you'll convince yourself that you're always interested in the best thing. You're interested in your health. You're working so hard on, eating correctly. You're gathering up all information. And so if you're basically like learning about things and then you're not putting them into action because you know so much, so we have to be able to close that knowing and doing gap. But the problem with this is that if you have a food thing, which is what I called my program, I called my program Crush That Food Thing, Self-Discovery System, because it, to me, after fixing it, it's just a thing. And what I mean by that is that it is an underneath, below the surface, subconscious feeling about yourself that you're having. And when you're trying to fix that subconscious below the surface feeling about yourself with on the top of the surface solutions, well, you're going to keep the problem down here and you're looking outside of yourself for the answers. The answers do not lie outside of yourself. They lie inside of yourself. And that's where the problem is. And that's why I didn't realize that for 30 years when I was like, oh, that's a diet. Oh, look at that great food. Oh, and talking to my friends, oh, what did you try? Keto? Oh, can you send me the recipes? Yeah, I really want to try that. Like, I didn't realize that all of that stuff, because I had a food thing, because I had deep emotional issues, because I wasn't able to get out of my own way, because I was using all of those things on the surface to dim my own light, so that way I never really kind of gave myself a meaning and a purpose, that it all was about keeping up with the Joneses, how I looked, a comparison, like what are you supposed to eat? Listening to everybody else tell me what I'm supposed to have for my own body. Now, the one thing that I had learned, and I thought was a very valuable piece of information, I'll share it with you, is that one person's perfect food is actually another person's poison. So it's not surprising that, like, for me, when I did go on diets, like, there were certain things that actually felt better to me. I stopped eating chocolate for a while. I had less heart palpitations. I stopped eating dairy, like my stomach hurt less. Those things, those were real tangible things. But at the same time, every time that I went on some kind of like food, avoidance, quote unquote, diet, it left me in the dark as far as what my subconscious was really wanting. So it allowed me to distract myself from getting to the root cause of the problem, because all I was doing was getting surface level solutions. You cannot solve this problem with surface level solutions. So if you think you're going to go back on Weight Watchers for the umpteenth million time, if you think you're going to go start on a keto plan, if you think that you're going to follow these recipes, if you think you're going to hire a personal trainer and a coach and you're going to learn how to eat well, that's great. If you don't have a food thing. But if you have a food thing, none of that stuff's going to work. It will work for short term. It just won't work long term. And there's a reason why food is constantly in your mind. So even when you're on those diets, I mean, don't get me wrong, like it's super easy, right? I was on those shake and bar plans. My gosh, how easy is that? Blending the thing, drinking it up. Oh, good, I'm not hungry for a few hours. Fantastic. Do you think during those few hours I didn't think about food? I didn't think about when the next shake was coming? I didn't think about anything in between? No, of course I did. Because you know why? Because that food thing was right there, still raging inside of me. And when I say this, I mean the reason why I was struggling with the problem to begin with. And see, that's what we're using all of these diets, all of these plans, all these things. We're using all of that to keep us like swirling around in our mind about food, because even if you're on a diet, by golly, you're thinking about food every second. You know you are. And I'm not just talking about like thinking about eating all the sugar and the candy and all that stuff. I'm talking about you're thinking about the diet. So now maybe you're not physically craving sugar and stuff like that. That's fine. But correct me if I'm wrong, that you're still thinking about like, oh, I have to only eat a few ounces of this. Oh, we're going to go to that restaurant. Can't get the sauce. Nope, can't do that. And then you also tend to, and I've seen this happen a bazillion times, where you also tend to start to sort of sugarcoat things, like lie to yourself a little bit. Like I've seen so many people. I had one gal that we were at dinner and there was bread on the table and she was like, nope, I can't eat bread. Like I don't have any carbohydrates. And then the next morning she ordered pancakes. And I was like, oh. And this was going back years and years ago, because I also became the food police years ago. So back in those days, like I looked at everything, I saw it all. And so I remember saying to her, oh, I thought you were not eating carbs. And she's like, well, I just said I wasn't eating bread. And it was like, oh, like she didn't know that pancakes are like a bread, like that's, she didn't know. And so it's a really interesting piece that when we're, got food, like, you know, for me, like I was always dieting, you know, so, but I was watching everybody else. So no matter whether I was consuming it or I was just thinking about it or I was judging it or I was comparing myself or I was feeling left out, because it was like, darn it all, how come you can eat pizza? I can't eat that. And so no matter what happened, even if I was like doing well on my diet, I still was removing myself from the world. I wasn't free. And the reason why I wasn't free is because the root cause of the problem was there, happy as a lark, happy that I was distracted from actually ever discovering that there was a root cause of the problem. So all of the things that you're doing up on the surface, those are the same reasons why you have food on your mind all the time, even if you're on a diet. So the first thing that I did to solve my problem, to stop thinking about food all the time, the first thing I did was I got curious. That's it. I got curious. I got curious of like, why? Why was I having this problem? And it's interesting. I have a quote. Well, actually, let me just share before I do that. That like now because I got curious, because I understand the root cause of my problem, because I no longer struggle with the root cause of the problem. And I'm going here. It's not that it's in my stomach. It's just that for me, that's where I felt everything. And for you, it might be your heart. And for you, it might be your mind. And for you, it might be your back. Or for you, it might be your skin. And so, you know, for you, it might be your vision. And maybe you're blurred in some way. For you, it might be your hearing, maybe a ringing in your ears. These things come out in physical ways. And so for me, it was in my gut. My stomach during those 40 years was a disaster. And it was all inside of here. The root cause of my problem was inside, not of my stomach because I had, you know, some kind of digestive problems, although I did. It was inside of my gut because my intuition was telling me that all of the surface level solutions and all the surface level stuff that I was worried about and anxious about and guilty about and didn't trust myself and was, you know, felt like I wasn't accepted and all of those things, they were all in my gut. And I had nerves and anxiety and I was riddled with worry. And honestly, like I wasn't serving my purpose in my life. I was just keeping myself stuck and I was keeping myself up on the surface level. But man, it was attacking me from the inside out. And so now I don't struggle with guilt. I don't struggle with shame. I don't struggle with regret. I don't struggle with thinking to myself, oh, those cookies are calling my name or that, you know, I have food on my mind 24 hours a day. I don't. I eat when I'm hungry. I stop when I'm full. And that is coming from a woman from a girl, really. I mean, this started when I was young. This happened throughout decades of my life. And now it's gone. So if it's gone for me, and I'm just a normal girl, like I am just a normal girl. I know that you might see me here on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, YouTube, whatever, and you might think that I'm some whatever famous person reading a script on the screen, but that's not happening. I'm sitting in my home. I'm here by myself. And this is my content because I fixed myself from the inside out and I did it with getting curious. So think about this. I want you to read this quote. This quote is by Viktor Frankl, but let me just say this first. No, let me just read the quote. When a man cannot find meaning, he numbs himself with pleasure. And what's interesting about this is that there was pleasure in everything that I did with food. Whether I was using food to comfort myself, whether it tasted good, whether it was like lighting up my brain chemistry, whether I was thinking about the next diet I could go on, whether I was hopping on the scale going, oh yes, I lost weight, or I was like, oh no, I gotta work harder. Like there was pleasure in a lot of those things. But it's interesting because and I'll read it again, when a man cannot find meaning, he numbs himself with pleasure. So think about that. So now I have to get curious about what's the meaning of my life. And I want you to think about that, because I know that coming into this, you did not think that I was going to tell you that there was a lack of meaning and that you were maybe using food to avoid finding that meaning. And now I'm not saying that you don't have meaning in your life or you don't have a purpose here. What I'm saying is that you are dimming your own light and you are avoiding finding that purpose and finding that meaning or giving that meaning. You see, I didn't know that I had this meaning inside of me until I fixed this emotional eating habit. I had no idea. In my world, I didn't go to school to do this. I mean, I am a health coach. I just didn't go to school to do this. And this is coming from experience, because I have literally unturned every stone inside of my mindset, inside of my heart, my soul, my gut, my spirit. And that has reconnected me and reunited me with my true self. And that has given me meaning. And that's why I don't think about food 24/7. And so you're no different than me. You have a meaning inside of you as well. You do. And if you're scared of finding that meaning, then you'll use surface level things to basically avoid, to tell yourself that this is the only pleasure in your life. But if that's the only pleasure in your life, the food, and you have to think about it 24 hours a day, well then how are you ever going to find the meaning of what it really is about? And so you'll keep blocking it. And that's what I did. And before I knew that I was doing that, I couldn't have shared this with you, but now that I know better, I can do better and I can share it with you too. So, I want to just give you another example of what it is that we need to go on here. Hang on, before I go around the block, I just want to make sure that I get to all of the things that I wanted to go to. This is one more quote from Viktor Frankl. He says that every human being has the freedom to change in an instant. And I want you to think about that, because before you knew this information today, well, you were just not understanding that there is curiosity that lies deep within you. And when I say deep within you, I don't mean that it's like buried deep within you. I just mean that it's deep in your soul, in your spiritual self. Many times when I start working with women in self-discovery, they're like, I'm not unturning those stones. I don't want to, it's very deep inside of me. What's deep inside of you is your spirituality and your character strengths. And what we end up doing is we end up surfacing that up, and we end up kind of using these simple pleasures around like food to distract ourselves. And then when we shame ourselves because we've eaten the food or gone off the diet or gained the weight or blah, 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 whatever, that gives us an added distraction from connecting, or I should say reconnecting, with your own spiritual self, and really being able to push through the meaning of your life and getting curious about where it is that you got stuck. Because, and I've said this before in other videos, in an unguarded moment, you were your best friend. And I don't know where that quote came from. It's not from me. It's just that it lights me up when I hear that, because when we're guarded, when we're putting up all these protections, when we're putting up all these walls and these blocks and telling ourselves it's just about the food, it's just about the food, it's just about the food, when meanwhile, just below that is the real truth. But because we think it's about the food, we're blocking that truth. And that's why the food just keeps coming in your head. And that's why you can't stop thinking about it. It's doing its job. If you are intent on dimming your own light, you have to have something to distract you. Might as well be food. Why not, right? So as we start to think about this, I want you to, think about getting curious about why you feel the way that you do about yourself. Meaning, like, why do you have this problem to begin with? And I also want you to start to connect with that unguarded version of yourself. I know some of the women, most of the women that I coach, feel like they've been struggling with this for decades and decades and decades. But I just coached a gal last night and I asked her, I said, what did you like to do as a kid? And she said, I like to pretend. I was theatrical. I like to make things up. And I said, great. I said, let's start doing that with your eating. Let's start making things up. Like, let's start playing with your food a little bit. Let's start reconnecting with that younger version of you, that little girl. And trust me when I say this, that suggestion that I gave to her, I would never have given her that suggestion if we hadn't already been working together for a bit of time. It's not like the first thing that I would suggest to anybody. But now as she and I are moving through this piece of the puzzle together, we're starting to begin to change her habits. And in changing her habits, we have to help her reconnect with where she got lost to begin with. And that's the key piece. Where did you get lost to begin with? This was not your whole purpose in your life, period, end of story. So a couple of things that you can look at is one, ask yourself these questions. If I did not have to think about food all the time, what could I think instead? Like, what are you missing out on because you're thinking about food all the time? So write a list. Really, just write a list. What could I think about if I didn't have to think about food? If I didn't have to think about points? If I didn't have to spend time journaling my food, which I have to say, I know I'm going to say something that is not going to connect with some of you. And that's okay. If it doesn't connect with some of you, then I'm not the right coach for you right now. Not at this point. But journaling your food is a enormous way to stay stuck. It just is. Because, I mean, who has time for that? You know what I mean? So there is such a more purposeful meaning in your life than for you to like write down that you ate 2 ounces of chicken. Like, you don't need to do that. You don't. You will eat what your body tells you, but because you're blocking it with all this surface level stuff, you're not connecting with yourself yet, and you're not connecting with the meaning of why you're living to begin with. What's your purpose? What's the meaning? And if we don't give yourself some space to do that, then we can't get underneath it. We won't ever be allowed to get underneath it. The second thing that you could do is you could write down just what would be your solution. And I ask this sometimes on the clarity call that I give. I give a free clarity call to anybody who is interested. Sometimes I use this in that. If you were walking down the road and there was a big billboard on the side of the road, and on the billboard you see some words, and those words are the solution to your problem with food. What would the billboard say? And so just like for a second, just think of the billboard, and the first immediate sentence, the first words that come into your head, that's what you write down, and that is what you get curious about. And the last thing is ask yourself, and write these words down in your handwriting, and write your name. So if I was to do this, I would write, Lisa, what is the purpose of staying stuck? Question mark. And just write it down. And you're going to see things come up. I mean, first you're going to want to say, well, there is no purpose. But there is. Well, I get to stay scared. I get to not move forward. I get to tell myself that, you know, my husband's the problem. I get to tell myself that this is how I was brought up. So if you see all those things, like the husband being the problem, that would be like, I get to blame someone else. This is how I was brought up puts you in a victim's chair. Like, there's a lot of things that are attached to the meanings of what it is that you might answer to a question like that. And so do that. And then reach out to me. And let's review it together. I'm open, okay? So I'm here for you, and we'll get through this together. All you have to do is take the first next step. So write that down also. What is my first next step? You don't have to have it all solved. That's why you could have a coach. and then we'll figure out what your first next step is together. But if you think about it being like this long journey and you don't know what the first step is, you don't know where to start, and then you think you have to take all the steps that you do climb, you have to like kind of carry them all with you, and it gets very heavy, and it's not true. Just the first next step. And so hopefully your first next step will be to reach out and book a phone call with me, because I would love to chat with you and talk a little bit more about this. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks. Bye now.